Welcome to Socrates, Garrett Live. It's good to be back in the studio on this Tuesday evening, 1 week before we have our elections here in the city of Jackson and across the state of Mississippi. So we're going to pay some attention to that as we go forward. But it's good to be back and have an opportunity to talk and share ideas and concepts with our viewers all over the world. It's very important that we recognize that this program is being brought to you by Earth Blend Coffee, one of the finest coffee brands in America, roasted right here in Jackson, Mississippi. Now, last time I was on the show, we had our guest with us, Attorney Dorsey Carson, a prominent attorney here in Jackson, Mississippi, with offices in Atlanta, Houston, and Jackson. And the week before that, we had attorney Brent Hazard, one of the premier attorneys here in the state of Mississippi. So we try to bring you a diverse audience, an audience that has philosophies and opinions about things that are a little different from what we normally see in the African American community on a day-to-day basis. So we gotta be able to understand how we work together and what are the key points that's keeping us apart. Now, many would say that it's just racism that's keeping us apart, just a hatred for your fellow man for no reason whatsoever other than the ability to try and maintain a social status that you currently enjoy. And so some of us don't think that that is the essence of the problem at all. Now, we talk a lot about politics, and we talk a lot about economics. And so we understand how those two things work together. We understand that when we achieve political power, then the community expects and deserves to receive economic power. One comes right after the other. The only purpose for having political power is so that you can impact the economics in your community. And that's what we're striving to do here in Jackson, Mississippi, and that's what other urban cities all across America are trying to do. When they establish their EBO plans, their Equal Business Opportunity Plans, when they establish goals and quotas and percentages, what they're trying to do is to make sure that all members of the civilization, all members of the community are able to participate in the economics of our society. Because when you're left out of the economics, you're left far, far behind. And unfortunately, that's been the faith of the African American community for far too long. But today we see more emphasis being placed on how do we correct that than ever before. Not since Richard Nixon initiated the affirmative action program and the 8A set-aside have we seen as much dialogue and conversation about economics in the African American community. And that's why today you're getting so much conversation about the Black Wall Street in Tulsa. That's why you're getting so much dialogue about economics in the black community. Because we realize that if we don't share in the economics, then there will be no progress and no growth. And as a country, we cannot move forward and compete with the rest of the world. Diversity is our strength. It is not some cross that we bear. It is not something that we have to hand out to others. Diversity is the strength of what we do, bringing those brains power and those minds together from different backgrounds and different ethnicities will create economics like we've never seen before. But when you suppress an entire segment of your community, then you hurt the entire community. Now, it's difficult, and black businesses, you have a strong role to play. The African American business community has to do its part. It has to develop capacity. It's got to solve the question of capacity. You often hear when politicians are speaking or white business colleagues are speaking, they will say, we just can't find anyone. And for too long, we have allowed that to be the order of the day, and we allow you to get a waiver not requiring you to have minority participation in contracts for goods and services within our municipalities and our states. So we can't have any waivers. We need to abandon the concept of we can't find anyone. You know, part of the responsibility of effective leadership is to create in areas where there's missing. So if you have a need for a tremendous amount of cleaning and there are no janitorial service companies in your community, we create them. We do business development. We have programs designed to grow. We mentor, we tutor, we do apprenticeships. We do the kinds of things necessary to raise the capacity in that area where we have opportunities. Now, I know that our leaders are trying. I know that this is not some self-hatred. It's not the neglect or the lack of desire. I know they are trying. They often speak about the need for business development, a strong black business class. Most politicians will agree that that is tremendously important, that we have a strong black business class. Well, what are we going to do to create that? How do we get a strong business class? Mayor Harvey Johnson was on this show with me several weeks ago, and one of the things that he was most proud of as the first African-American mayor in Jackson was the fact that he initiated programs to build a strong black business class. He was most proud of that. And all of our politicians should be focused on the economics of our politics. That's what we got to do to solve the problem. Now, going back to what the business community has to do, because it's hard, it's tough, but you have to build capacity, and you can't build capacity unless you build relationships. The critical thing in business is to establish relationships. And that's not easy for us as African Americans, because we tend to go to churches where it's 90% black. We tend to eat, and even if we're in a majority-owned restaurant, we tend to sit together. At the bar, we sit together. At the football games, we sit together because we're comfortable with one another. And so there are no real opportunities for us to develop relationships. Now, our government has an opportunity to fix that with business matching opportunities, where they put all of their prime contractors in a room, and they put all of the minority contractors in the same room, and you introduce them to one another, to each other. You would be surprised at the relationships that would be initiated that would be maintained for decades to come from that simple little introduction. Don't even allow an African-American business person to sit next to an African-American business person. Force the diversity, force the interaction between the citizens in the same community. We all live in Mississippi. We all live in the metropolitan area. So we got to know one another. You got to find a way of doing that, because there is nothing more important in this world than relationships. First, my pastor would say, you got to have a relationship with God. Yes, you do. And then you got to have a relationship with your fellow man. Yes, you do. And once you establish that, all kinds of opportunities can open for you. And these relationships have no boundaries. They're not localized in any way. It's just as easy for me to have a relationship with someone in New York as it is in Jackson once the introduction takes place. Because this really is a global economy. This really is a very, very small world. How often do you go places and someone speaks of someone in Atlanta, but you know that person? Or you go into a restaurant in Chicago and you see someone that you know. It happens all the time. That's how small the world is. And it will do the same thing if you went to Tokyo. You run into somebody that you know. The world is very, very small. The opportunities have never been better than they are right now for us to build relationships and improve the economics in our communities. That's a tough job to do, but you got to do it. I'm reminded when I first started out in business some time ago that I couldn't get a banking relationship that works for me. So where and how was I able to get the startup capital necessary to launch my business? Well, I was reading the Wall Street Journal. Now check that out. I didn't say I was reading the Clarion Ledger. I said I was reading the Wall Street Journal. And in the journal, I saw where International Paper Company in New York had created a MESBIC, a Minority Enterprise Small Business Program. Now, the interesting thing about that was that the government would put in, let's just say for every $1 million that International Paper Company put into a pool to do business development in small disadvantaged communities, the government would match it with $1 million. So now you got $2 million for International Paper Company to loan out to disadvantaged businesses throughout the whole world. So I read that and I saw that and I put my application in to International Paper Company in New York City, from Jackson, Mississippi in 1983. I applied and received a loan from that MESBIC for $250,000 in 1983, when interest rates was 20%. A bad time to start business, no doubt. But you got to go when you got to go. And so I got the loan was approved by International Paper Company, and all of the New Yorkers came down to Jackson, Mississippi to see this guy, Socrates Garrett, that they were going to loan this money to. Now, to me, $250,000 was a lot of money. It's a lot of money in 1983, and it's a lot of money today. But it was necessary that I find a way to get startup capital to launch my business. And we're going to continue this conversation very shortly. I'm getting ready to go to a station break, because it's important that we recognize those that provide the capital for this program to run, those that sponsor activities in our communities that allow us to get the word out on how we did what we did and what do we plan on doing and sharing and teaching as we go. So I want you to stay tuned with me, and let's enjoy this break from Earth Blend Coffee.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome to the Adventurous Podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.
Welcome back. We'll pick right up with the dialogue and the conversation about my new business partners from New York City. They came down to Jackson, Mississippi to meet with me to finalize the documents to make this loan for $250,000. Now, we were in the room, in the conference room, and the gentleman said, well, you're going to have to pledge the stock in your company to this loan. And you're going to have to pledge some real estate or some other assets to get this loan. Now keep in mind that they got the money, half of it anyway, $1 million from the government in order to make a loan to disadvantaged businesses like mine. And they didn't have to pledge anything. But that's the rules of the game. So I was very irate about that. I was young, and Granddaddy would say, you know, I thought I had it going on. I knew I was educated and trained by the best corporation in the world and ready to go in business. So I wasn't going to pledge all of my stock in my company. I was not going to do it. And so at that point in time, the young white gentleman sitting next to me said, Socrates, you really don't understand the golden rule, do you? I said, yeah, I understand it. Do unto others as you would have them. He said, no. That's not the golden rule. He said, the golden rule is he who has the goal rules. He who has the goal rules, period. Now, you either pledge this stock and take this $250,000 and maybe you got a chance one day, or I'm going to get a plane back to New York. Well, I had to cave in. Pride, everything, countenance dropped, everything. But I pledged all of the stock, and they loaned me the $250,000 to get started. Now, I'm in Jackson, Mississippi. My finance is coming out of New York City in 1983. No banker in Mississippi would touch a startup African-American business, period. And so I was able to get started. Now, those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to share with young and not so young African-American owned businesses. There is always a way. There's always a relationship. There's always a program. There's always someone there that can afford you with the seed capital and the opportunity that you need to get started. So we were in business, off and running. Now, I came out of Xerox Corporation, where I was branch sales manager for Xerox Corporation, with offices in Pensacola, Florida, and Shreveport, Jackson, and Mobile, Alabama. And I had some 85 salespeople in throughout that region that worked for me. I was the number one salesperson for Xerox for many, many years. But an interesting thing happened to me when I went in business for myself. When I went in business for myself, I was unable to sell anything. Hear me clearly. The number one salesperson in corporate America selling Xerox machines can't sell anything with Socrates Garrett's name on it. What a lesson. And that exists somewhat today, that African American owned businesses have hit that wall and they have tried to find a way around it. By many of them would say, I don't own the company. It's a black-owned company, but you can't let anybody know you own it, because you know they won't buy from you. So you hide the fact that you own the company. You get a white guy to front for you. That's how African American business leaders were able to buy property in the affluent areas of Jackson, Mississippi. That's how that happened. I was with Cornelius Turner, a legend in himself, a great business person. We're going to talk about him one day at length. But I saw how he was able to acquire property in Eastover, in the prominent side of Jackson, Mississippi. Yeah, the white guy buy it. And so black businesses get hit hard from every angle. So now here you go. Let's get back to point. Here you go. Number one salesperson in the country, can't sell anything that he makes. So I had to get therapy. I said, so what's going on here? But see, what I didn't realize, and this will help a lot of you, I didn't realize there's this thing out there called community involvement. It's called sponsorships. It's called promoting movies. The money that Xerox put into the community in branding its products and giving into the community, I didn't recognize that when I was selling copiers, I was selling their brand, and it was not me. So when I realized that, what did I have to do? And I had to do this in a hurry. I had to become very active in the community and start to give into the community and work in the community and try to build relationships in the community so that I would have some goodwill. Because interestingly enough, in business, and I've seen this happen time and time again, the most successful African-American owned business would travel with a prominent civil rights icon or a prominent minister. And this happens today. I had a African-American owned firm out of New Orleans come to see me several years ago about teaming with me to do some work in Puerto Rico. And they brought their pastor with them to meet me. Because a person that has acquired goodwill and influence in the community can open all doors, whereas business people are so hard working and trying to develop their craft and their product until they haven't spent a lot of time in the community, serving at stew pot, attending the visiting the Chamber of Commerce. They haven't served on boards. They haven't done a lot of that. They didn't have time until we realize that without that, we can't open any doors. So while an African American preacher may not have any assets, may not have any of the things that we work so hard to acquire in terms of wealth and material things, but yet they can get an appointment to see the CEO of NTG on one phone call. And they can call, in this case, today, they can call Haley Zachary, who is president of NTG, and say, Haley, on first name basis, I would like for you to visit with me and Socrates at your earliest convenience. And the door would swing open. Now, it would have taken me 10 years to get to a point where I could have an audience with the CEO and president of the largest utility company in the state of Mississippi if I had to do it on my own. So we have to understand these things and how to navigate around them. We can't fall backwards and start hiding, because at the end of the day, you can't be successful with that, even though it can be painful. I watched my friend Roy Dixon, who brought the first scan business in the state of Mississippi. Now, you know, African Americans grew up in the country, on the farm. They know how to make scans, pork skins. And Brother Dixon had the recipe. He made the best skins in the whole country. Right down there on Ferry Street in Jackson, Mississippi. And everybody was buying and eating the skins. Well, it was time to expand. We want to grow. So Dixon acquired a beautiful building out on Lynch Street, brought in all of the modern equipment, brought in all of the graphics and the artwork and the labels, a beautiful package, and the label on the bag said, Dixon Skins. And then he put his picture on the bag. Now, unfortunately, and what a shame this is, when he put his picture on the bag, his business declined. His sales dropped way off. And ultimately, he wasn't able to continue. Now, the message here, don't get it twisted. The message here is not to hide from your product. That's not it. The message here is to know that when you brand your product, that the opposition will try and hurt you. And so you have to have enough goodwill in the community. You have to have enough influencers in the community to ride through this attack. It's real. It's subliminal. It's real. Do you ever wonder why in a city like Jackson, Mississippi, that's 85% African American, that there's not an African American car dealership, a major dealership that's owned by African Americans in the city? Does that puzzle you in some way as to why and how it is that we buy all of these cars and no black has a dealership in the entire city? And if one does have ownership in it, like Deuce McAllister had in the car dealership, then you have to hide. This is a real indictment on our society and how it has treated and continues to treat aspiring young African American business people that are doing everything they know how to do to try to break through into mainstream, into being a first-class citizen, nothing more. How hard it is to do that. Let's take a break and hear a word or two from our sponsor, Earth Blend Coffee.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome to the Adventurous Podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.
Welcome back. Let's pick up where we left off. It's very, very difficult for African American businesses to find a way to break into mainstream. But it's not impossible. Go back and remember that I said that it's all about relationships and the influence that you have. One of the largest companies, African American owned companies, in the state of Mississippi, in Jackson, is a company called MINAC. MINAC, what does that mean? It means Minorities in Action. And in 1978 or 1979, somewhere in there, a young man who was comptroller down at the Job Corps Center by the name of Booker Jones and his wife Ann Jones had a vision that they would start their own company and they would put together this proposal and get it up to the Department of Labor to see if they could get it funded so they could run their own Job Corps centers. Not continue to be an employee, but to operate your own Job Corps center. So the proposal was a huge document. It was some 150 pages, and they needed 150 copies, and they needed it all by Monday, and this was Thursday evening. Well, minority business people have always been shrewd. You have to be shrewd to even think you can do this. So Booker Jones was so shrewd until he called me and he said, look, I'm interested in buying a copy machine. I said, well, I'll be right there because I sold copy machines. And he said, but before I buy it, you're going to have to demonstrate that it can handle the workload that I have need for. So I'll be happy to do that. So he gave me this document, 150 pages, and he needed 100 copies bound. He said, if you can do this over the weekend, I'll buy that copy machine. I laugh about that today. Old Booker Jones knew that I needed to sell a copy machine. He knew that he needed these proposals made, and so we became partners to that extent. I worked all weekend long, took those proposals back to Ann Jones' house, and Booker submitted his proposal. But that wasn't enough. Yes, he understood how to run a Job Corps Center. Yes, he had the experience. He had all of the intellect. He had all of the knowledge. He had all of the experience on how to do that. But he didn't have what? He didn't have the relationships. He didn't have any influences because he's been busy learning his trade. But to his credit, he was shrewd enough and understood that enough until he made Aaron Henry the chairman of his board. Aaron Henry was in Mississippi the same thing that Julian Barnes and John Lewis were in Georgia. Aaron was the dean of civil rights activities. So if Aaron took the proposal that Booker had put together to Washington, D.C., it would be looked upon with seriousness. Whereas if he had taken it, it would not have been. What's my point? My point is that you learn your craft, you build your infrastructure, you get your business plan, you get everything in place that you need to run a successful business, and then you find somebody with some credits and talent and influence in our community that don't know how to run nothing. And you make them a significant part of what you're trying to do, because they'll open the doors that you can never open. So Aaron and Booker Jones were awarded a contract to run the Job Corps Centers. And today, MINAC is north of $80 million a year in revenue right here in Jackson, Mississippi. From a comptroller of a Job Corps Center in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, to a $80+ million operation in Jackson, Mississippi. The poorest state, all of the racism that we talked about, all of the things that are in place to keep one down, no financial opportunities. You can't let people know you own your business, hide your pictures, all of that, yet and still you find a way to get it done. And that's how you get it done. Now, there are countless examples of how this works, not only in Mississippi, but all over the world. When I talk about Reginald Lewis that started Beatrice Food, yeah, he understood the mechanics of the business and how to run it and how to put it all together. But if it wasn't for milking the junk bond man that he tied into, he could have never built Beatrice Foods. You always gotta have that relationship to get this done on a large scale, on a small scale. That's why our ancestors knew all of this, even though they didn't know how to share it or teach it, but they knew it. Remember how when you would bring your friend home with you for the first time, and when they would walk up in the house, that your parents would look at them and they would say, "Who's your folk?" Where'd you come from? They understood that you needed to have value in understanding the people that you're dealing with, and where they came from, who they're for, what their lineage, what their pedigree is, what their associations with. That's why I even go back a step further. That's why you had prearranged marriages. You didn't have the ability to choose a mate at 18 years old. How you gonna have you don't have the ability to do that at 50. So they tried to help you with that, because it was tremendously important. Principles that work in everyday life apply to business, everyday business. Even when I look at an income statement and a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet and job cost reports and classes inside of the business and how we're doing in various classes, my grandfather would say to me, "Son, you got to make sure that your income is greater than your outgoing." Now it took 3 years at Harvard for them to be able to teach that, how to make sure. Yeah, it sounds simple that your income has got to be greater than your outgoing, but how to make sure that's happening is where the trick is. Because if you don't, you're right back at the old country store. You're right back at the master's feet again. You're modern day sharecropping and don't even know it. So there are a lot of lessons that we got to teach out here. We got to learn some things. There's some hard lessons that our business people have to understand. Accounting, finance, marketing, manufacturing, distribution, research and development, and how to mitigate this silent partner that you got with you all the time, Uncle Sam, who never leaves home with you in the morning, never works during the day, but wants 20 or 25% of everything you make. You got to understand how to mitigate those things, because the methods are taught every day in other communities, but never, ever are taught in African American communities. And so we learn the hard way. And that's why we're still first generation in what we do, because we weren't able to sustain the head start that many of us got from our parents. But there are some lessons. You got to be able to see things. And this program is designed to focus on how you mitigate, how you navigate that, and how you succeed against all odds all the time. Because we can do it. There's so much talent in our community. There is so much opportunity in our community. We are in an 85% African American populated city. 85% of the products for goods and services, 85% of the contracts for goods and services ought to be going to African Americans. My. Now, Mayor Johnson said when he was here, that's a very unpopular conversation to have in other communities. And I understand that. But if I'm going to live and work here, then I should have an opportunity to participate in the economy. And we got to get our politicians to become our friends. There's nothing more important than a relationship inside of the government of which you reside. African American businesses have to have those relationships in order to grow and in order to survive. We're missing something here today. We don't quite get the roles and the rules that we must live by to grow our community and to end the poverty that exists in our communities. Stay tuned. We're going to go to a commercial with Earth Blend, and we'll be right back.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome to the Adventurous Podcast. I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.
Welcome back. This is our final segment of the show for tonight. So we're going to deal with some hard issues. And I have to be transparent if I'm going to be helpful. And you gotta allow me to share things that members of my family would say, you really ought not say that. But I have to, because it's important. Let's back up for a moment. Now, remember when I said that I got the money, the $250,000. I went into business, but when I went into business, I couldn't sell anything, remember? And so, if you don't sell anything, all you're doing is having outgo, as Granddad would say, and no income, and the end of that is going to be disastrous. But I worked at that tremendously hard. Had a great business plan. I had a great team of folk. I had the manufacturers operation up and running. I had the accountants in, a great set of books. I had everything that you need to be successful in business, but I wasn't selling anything. So at the end of the day, I had to bankrupt the love of my life, my business. Now, filing for bankruptcy is a stigma in the community, black community, like you got the plague or something. it's like you need to be ostracized and set off on an island by yourself. How disgusting. But when I went down to the court, and the judge said to me, he said, Mr. Garrett, how did you acquire almost $1 million in indebtedness on $100,000 worth of assets? I said to him, I said, that's a great question. The answer to that question is that I had a great business plan. So anybody that looked at the plan knew it should work. I don't care if you came out of Harvard or if you came out of Piney Woods. The plan said this will work. But it didn't work because there was nowhere in the plan that I could account for or understood the impacts of racism and the fact that nobody would buy the product with my label on it. I could demonstrate it. Works better than Mean Green or any other degreaser that you see on the shelf, but couldn't sell it. So what happened there, and what led me to that, is one day I had a conversation with James Meredith. And see, you gotta know all of the guys that came before you that are in your community. You gotta know them. You got to study them. You got to understand what they did. But more importantly, you got to understand how they did it. So when I started telling James Meredith about my dilemma, my situation, and that this was before I decided to file, what I told James Meredith was that I owe this money, but nobody is bothering me about it, so I don't have to pay it back. I'll just leave that alone and continue working. Now listen at this very carefully. This is where your seniors come in. This is where the gray hair comes in. James Meredith said to me, no one is ever going to bother you about that indebtedness until you do something good. Until you start to build something with the chance of it being successful, is when everybody is going to show up. So you're going to work the next 10 years of your life. No one's going to say anything to you. You're going to become successful, and then everybody is going to come see you. I said, what are you saying? He said, close that chapter out. Understand this, young man. Bankruptcy is not a defensive strategy. African Americans don't get this. They get this slogan that if you fall or if you fail, get up and try again. But that's all they get. They don't get the fact that falling is moving forward. They can't see that. It's not a defensive strategy, it's an offensive strategy. No one ever wants to be in that position, but this great country fixed it, the rules of engagement, where there are no debtors' prisons. It's an honorable thing to owe and not be able to pay, but want to pay. And even if you go back into biblical principles, and most everything we do can be found in biblical principles. In the Bible, and I'll check with my bishop, but in the Bible, I believe it says that every 7 years, everything ought to start over. Regardless of where you are, at that station, wipe all that out, start over. You see, America needs you to start over because now you are brighter than you were when you first started. That's why there's no debtor's prison. That's why they encourage you to get up, start again, take the lessons that you've learned. You may not know what to do, not yet, but you do know what not to do. That's tremendously important. You may not know what to do, but now you know personally what not to do. And you start over. I had that experience. It wasn't 3 years later, through the grace of God and hard work and relationships, that I was able to achieve millionaire status. Listen to me very good now. My CPA called and said, "You are a millionaire." I don't know how I can explain it to you any clearer. It's tough. It's hard. There are going to be all kinds of obstacles. Sometimes you feel like you got to hide from who you really are. But don't do it. Push forward. Invest in other people. Get some relationships in the community. Have some goodwill. Help others. Be a servant. Do all of those things. You are just one relationship away from tremendous success. And you have no idea where it's coming from. Businesses are cyclical. If you stay in business, you will have a downturn and you could go broke again. 'Cause every day you put everything on the line. You may not understand business, but you may understand the casino. When you tell the dealer, let it ride. In business, every day you're saying, let it ride. You're reinvesting everything you've earned into it. And then the economy crashes, the market changes. That's why I read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Things change. Relationships change. You have an excellent relationship with some folk. You get new folk. You have no relationship. This is going to be a bad period for you. Question is, if you remember how you got here, it will never take you that long to get back during the downturn. You can be a millionaire today. You can be broke in a year. Just take one. In business, it just takes one episode to create either one. Just one episode to create either one. But that's the life we choose. We live on the edge. We enjoy the risk taking. We get up early. We work late. And we never complain. Now, don't get me wrong, we complain about the lack of opportunity. That's a marketing strategy. Sometimes we complain because we know that America loves an underdog. So when somebody asks you how you're doing, and they will ask me, how am I doing? I say, I'm struggling forward. Not struggling at all. But since America loves an underdog, sometimes you portray yourself in that role. You can do that if you like. But one day you will get to a point where your investments are so placed that one episode can't take you out. And that's when you know you've made it into mainstream America, that you are now a first-class citizen, enjoying all of the rights and privileges that America has to offer. I've enjoyed chatting with you this evening. I look forward to our conversation continuing next week as we continue to talk about Black empowerment. Good night.
Socrates Garrett Live every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. on WeBelieveDigital.com. Socrates talks politics, finances, and social issues that affect the Black community and so much more. Phenomenal guests and engaging conversation. Straight talk, no nonsense topics that are informative, educational, and inspiring. Socrates goes live with politicians, church leaders, business owners, and others. The time is now, talking to you about us. Socrates Garrett Live every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. on WeBelieveDigital.com.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
I'm your host, Deidre Perry, and these are my co-hosts. And weekly, we will be coming to you to bring you the latest information in the world of agriculture. We invite you to join us every Saturday from 10 to 10:30. Join us. Come on, take an adventure.